Oh hey, it's Wes. And today we are talking about the Nightwalker series of lenses from Sirui. More specifically, we have the 3-lens kit that includes the 24 1.2, 35 1.2, and 55 1.2. Very convenient. These are Super 35 or APS-C lenses. These ones specifically are the gunmetal versions. They also come in black. And these are E-mount versions, and they come in a variety of mounts, a very wide variety, to be honest. The Nightwalker series is very interesting to me. They kind of have a foot on two sides of things. We'll get into what that means later on. But first, as always, we're going to talk about the build quality. To me, and I've said this before, these are the most beautiful lenses I have ever used or held. That might not mean a lot to you. They come with this nice little kit. The one issue that I have with this kit is also a positive. It is very specifically form-fit to these lenses. But being a Cine lens, a lot of the time I will have lens filters and adapters mounted on the front of them. So even just having the tiniest little freewheel magnetic lens mount attached to the front of this makes it a bit of a tight fit. They are all identical in size and shape and almost identical in weight, so that if you're on a gimbal or some sort of a rig or something, you can switch between lenses easy peasy. This is all pretty normal stuff for Cine lenses though. But the fit and finish, the design, the way it feels in the hand, it's just the right weight for me. Very lightweight, but it feels like very solid quality. The throw for focusing is enormous, nice and smooth, not too dampened. You don't want a ton of damping in a Cine lens because the damping is a lot of the time going to be customized in your focus rig rather than on the lens itself. There is, however, no weather sealing. There's no gasket on the back of this, so you wouldn't want to use this out in the rain with these lenses. And I have had the 35 in my kit for quite some time now. It has taken some hits, some rough and tumble, and it's perfectly fine. Love the build quality of these lenses, especially for the price point, which we'll talk about later. Phenomenal. It's going to be a 9 out of 10. Again, no weather sealing. Gonna stay in the shadow here. Next up is handling and usability, and I've already touched on some of that. These are very lightweight, but again, that's partially because they are Super 35 lenses, but they also open up to an f1.2. That kind of foreshadows where we're going to go with this. These aren't remarkably well-corrected lenses, but that gives you the advantage of being very small and lightweight and easy to use. If we look at the design of the lenses themselves, the one issue that I have with usability is how close the aperture ring is to the focus ring. I would rather the focus ring be a little bit further out. I can see why there are reasons to do it both ways, because the shape of the barrel here prevents the focus ring from being made contact with at all times. But for me, that makes it a little bit harder to put it into my focus rig. These are so close together and they're very close to the body of the camera. Now, your mileage may vary, depends on how you rig up your camera. I'd rather have it out a little bit more prominently. There is very little, almost no focus breathing going on here. So again, ideal for video work. And on the front here, we have a surprisingly small 67mm filter ring, which I already have a ton of 67mm filters. It's one of my two main filter sizes. I mostly use 67s and 82s. So this is great for my compact rig. I'm not a huge fan of this low profile lens cap. It's not super easy to get a grip on from either the outside or the inside, but I do love the super low profile back caps, and I wish that all the Sony back caps were like this. Nikon's a bit like this, but they extend a little farther than they need to, but this is very nice low profile. Makes a little bit less of the lenses in the bag. So overall, these are fantastically easy to use lenses, the whole fit and finish of the lineup. Handling and usability, that's a 9 out of 10. Light, simple, easy. Image quality. This is where things get a little bit more complicated. As I'd mentioned before, these lenses have kind of a dual character. Wide open at f1.2, they are tremendously soft. And that can be fine for like situations where you don't mind that people's faces are a little bit softer skin tones, a little bit blurrier. chromatic aberration, if you're in a high contrast situation, is just off the handle. It's too much. However, once you stop it down to 2.0 or 2.8, it becomes perfectly reasonable, I would say even for professional work. Speaking of which, let's see some stuff.
Don't you believe just
So in this music video, for a lot of the close-ups, I'm using the 55, for some of them 35. The ultra-wides, those are a 16mm lens that had to be autofocus, so that's not from this set. And the shot down to the piano keyboard, that is the 35 G Master. But can you tell that one shot is a G Master and one is not? With the headshot and the piano here, we're stopped down to close to 2.8. I wasn't looking, it's hard to keep track of the aperture on these. It's totally fine. The background was pretty far away, so the depth of field still looked nice and smooth in the background. Still fantastic. So it's nice that they open all the way to 1.2, but you can't always use them that way, unfortunately. For flare resistance, it's not fantastic, and it sits in this middle ground where I would rather it either be more flare resistant so that I can add that either with filters or in post, or less flare resistant and give me some, you know, really spectacular high character stuff going on. But it's in the middle ground that I'm not a big fan of, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about image character. As far as color rendition goes, it's good, not great. And as far as consistency between the lenses, I would say it's very good, but not excellent. Okay. And if we look at our color chart comparison here, you'll see that it actually varies a little bit whether you're at 1.2 or further down your aperture scale in which ones exhibit the most differing color. So that's interesting. Overall, this is where we're losing the most in image quality. If you're going to use this lens stopped down to a medium amount, you'll probably have no issues whatsoever. If you want to use it wide open, you have to be prepared for the fact that these are not clinical lenses. They are not high-end lenses. But I mean, for the price that you're paying for these, you cannot expect that. What surprised me is that the 24mm has the best image quality, at least in my set. And 24mm tends to be more complex lens design. Between 35 and 50 tends to be the simplest lens designs, but I found my 24 exhibited less CA, it cleaned up sooner. They all had a similar amount of vignetting, especially the 24, which is a fair amount, and it never completely goes away from me. That's totally fine for me with a Cine lens, because vignetting can often help you to isolate your subjects. It is what it is. Overall, for image quality, I'm gonna give that a 6.5 out of 10. Image character. And that's where I was really hoping to get something good out of these, and no, I'm not disappointed. Bokeh, whether you're wide open or stopped down quite a bit, it stays very consistent, almost never nervous at all, very smooth. Around the edges you do get a bit of a D shape, which it's preferable to have some cat's eye rather than the D shape because that gives you a bit of a swirl that adds focus or draws the attention to the center, but still very nice. And again, when you stop it down, it stays very smooth, stays very round. Impressed with that, that's great. The consistency of the bokeh is not consistent between all of the lenses. I actually preferred the 24. Once again, the 24 is my winner here. Really surprised in that it's slightly soap bubble, and I like that. It's a little bit vintagey, whereas the 35 less so, and then the 55 even less so. The 55 is a very smooth, very little fringing on the edge. The 35 has a lot of chromatic aberration fringing around the edges. 55 does as well, but not quite as bad. And so when you're wide open, again, if you have a lot of contrast, that CA in the bokeh can get to be a bit much, and that's unfortunate. The flares, as I mentioned before, not a super big fan of them, but it's nice to be able to do like a low contrast wash and whatnot. It's not bad, it's just not as good or exciting as I had hoped that it would be. Sun stars are nice on these. Not the best, but very nice. Overall, the worst part about the character of these lenses is, once again, unfortunately, just the amount of chromatic aberration at play. If you have a busy background with a lot of contrast, that chromatic aberration can become quite obvious. But I guess I wouldn't really call this a bright light lens. I mean, it's called the Nightwalker. Although I have used it in broad daylight with ND filters on to cool things down. This is best used in lower light a lot of the time. For image character, I'm still going to give this an 8.5 out of 10, which is very high for me. Focusing performance. This one's a little bit tricky. A lot of people using Cine lenses, they have no issue with the fact that a lens doesn't have autofocus, but if you talk to people who are now using like Sony Venice, Burano and stuff, having autofocus, even in a professional setting, can be game-changing. You won't always use it, but it is great to have. And so for my focus scale, the most a manual focus lens can get in focusing performance is about 4. Might give it a 5 to 6 if it actually had electronic contacts that could engage things like auto punch-in and so forth. But this doesn't have that. And to get a 4, you have to have good focus peaking performance through the whole aperture range of the lens. This doesn't do that, unfortunately. As I said before, these lenses are pretty soft, and so focus peaking does not work reliably when they are wide open. Once you stop down to like 1.8, 2.0, you're totally fine. But at 1.2, you really gotta punch in digitally to confirm focus because peaking won't be reliable enough for you. And so for focusing performance, this is going to be a 3 out of 10. Value. As I've alluded to many times already in this review, value is where these things do well. Let's look at some numbers here. A single one of these lenses generally comes in around $350 or $400 if you want it in gunmetal, as I do. They look spectacular, it's worth it. Looking at the 3-lens setup, the MSRP is $1,000, but they're almost always on sale for $800. Let's compare that to other lower cost lens sets. If you get 3 of the SLR Magic T1.5, you're looking at about $1,050, 7 Artisans T2.1, $1,070, Mikey T2.1, $1,680, kind of crazy that Mikey is more expensive, but I haven't tried those, maybe they're spectacular. Venus Argus T1.0, ooh, 1.0, $2,400, a more exacting lens for sure. And then if we're looking at like bigger, older brands like Ari or Zeiss, depending on the lens lineup, you're looking at tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for a multi-lens setup. As far as value goes, I mean, it's pretty obvious which way we're going with this. It's going to be a 10 out of 10. It, at MSRP, slightly ekes out the competition. At the price it tends to actually go for, $800, that is a phenomenal value, and really puts into perspective a lot of the deficiencies of this lens in that, yeah, you can go down to 1.2, but it's not always usable But that is available to you, and at a price that's just crazy. If you just use these as though they were T 2.0 lenses, the value would be spectacular, and a lot of those issues with image quality would kind of dry up for the most part. It is what it is. It does open to 1.2, so I have to mark it based on that. But if we take that whole thing into perspective based on value, that's phenomenal. That is 10 out of 10. So overall, where does that leave us? That gets us a 37 out of 50. I mean, not an earth-shatteringly high number. However, again, this is not an Arri Master Prime here. So I would say that if you are a filmmaker just starting out and you just need to get into that Cine lens style, it's hard to go wrong with this. A very interesting thing about this is just how many mounts this is available for. We'll put that up there. And so on Fuji, fantastic, because all you are is Super 35 APS-C anyway. Seems like a lot of lens for Micro Four Thirds, but they are pretty lightweight. If you want to pick up one of these, it's going to be linked down in the description below to help support this channel and feed my fat cats. Until next time, let's go take some photos.